revealed Granger Insane Asylum. Have you ever felt the hair on the back of your neck stand up for no reason at all? Like someone's there, just out of sight, watching? I thought those moments were just tricks of the mind, until I found myself in the basement of the old Granger Asylum, standing before a door that had been sealed for nearly a century. I wasn't one to believe in ghost stories. Sure, I'd heard plenty growing up. Who hasn't? The tales about haunted houses, old cemeteries, and the obligatory campfire horror, but they were just that, stories. However, what happened to me, it's something else. Granger Asylum, once a facility for the mentally unstable, had long been abandoned. Decades of dust, crumbling walls, and the occasional graffiti from teens looking for a thrill. It was a place that had long been forgotten, until some urban explorers like me started sharing photos of eerie hallways and disused equipment online.
The place went viral, and before you knew it, there was a whole community of explorers, paranormal enthusiasts, and amateur ghost hunters talking about Granger.
Granger Asylum earned the nickname Soul Asylum because of the horrifying belief that the souls of its patients were trapped within its walls. After decades of brutal experiments, including lobotomies and invasive brain surgeries, the asylum became infamous for the way its patients' minds and identities were destroyed. Some believed that those who died there didn't truly leave, that their souls lingered, twisted by the torment they endured. The basement especially was said to be the place where lost souls were bound, endlessly repeating their suffering, unable to move on. That was something no one really talked about, at least not seriously, the basement. From what I'd read, even back in its day, there were rumors about the basement. Staff claimed to hear strange noises, and some even refused to go down there alone. Some said it was just old building noises. Others believed there were darker secrets buried beneath the asylum. Well, I wanted to see for myself. A group of us, me, Pete, and Jody, decided to check it out one Saturday afternoon. We'd explored Granger before, but never ventured into the basement. Most of the entranceways were either blocked by debris or padlocked. But that day we found a side entrance, half buried beneath fallen bricks that led directly into the bowels of the asylum.
Maybe this isn't such a good idea,
Jody muttered as we made our way down the creaking staircase. The air grew heavier with each step.
I heard some people never came back after trying to get into this part.
Urban legend. There's always some ghost story attached to places like this. Trust me, nothing's going to happen.
I wasn't so sure. We reached the basement floor and I could already feel the chill. The damp, stale air clung to my skin like an unwelcome blanket. And that's when I saw it. A door, slightly ajar, down a narrow corridor at the far end. It wasn't marked on any of the asylum's blueprints, and I hadn't seen it in any online forums. It was as if the place was hiding it in plain sight. "Guys," I whispered, "you seeing what I'm seeing?" We made our way toward the door, the air growing thicker with each step. The sound of our feet on the concrete floor echoed unnaturally, like the space was somehow stretching and shrinking at the same time. The door was a heavy metal thing, dull gray, almost rusted shut. The strange thing was it had no handle on this side, but when I pushed, it creaked open easily. On the other side was something straight out of a nightmare. A room, just a room, but not any ordinary one. The walls were covered in drawings, childlike but twisted. Faces distorted, eyes wide and hollow, mouths stretched into unnatural shapes. Scrawled across the walls repeatedly in a shaky hand were the words, "Insane in the membrane, insane in the brain." I froze. That phrase, it was something we'd all heard growing up, sure, but here, on these walls, it felt wrong, really wrong. I turned to Pete and Jody, but they were staring at the far corner of the room, eyes wide.
What the hell?
That's when I saw it. A journal lying open on an old, rusted table. I picked it up, half expecting it to disintegrate in my hands, but it held together. The entries were dated from the 1930s and detailed horrific experiments on patients. The staff at Granger were not only performing lobotomies, but using shock therapy to cure those they deemed beyond help. The journal described the patients as nothing more than test subjects, locked away and forgotten. And one patient, known only as Subject X, kept repeating that phrase, "insane in the membrane, insane in the brain." Now, I'm not one to scare easily, but standing in that room, reading those words, It felt like something was watching us. The air was thick and the walls seemed to close in. That's when the whispers started. Low at first, barely audible. But then they grew louder, more frantic.
Pete grabbed my arm. We need to get out of here. Now.
I didn't argue. We bolted for the door, but it slammed shut in front of us with a force that shook the walls.
Jody screamed, and I could feel my heart racing.
I yanked on the handle, but it wouldn't budge. The whispers grew louder, circling us, and then I heard it clearly. Insane in the membrane, insane in the brain. Suddenly, the lights went out. We were plunged into complete darkness. The only sound was our ragged breathing and those relentless whispers. I could feel something, someone, behind me, breathing down my neck. And then the laughter started. Not the kind of laughter you hear at a comedy club, but the kind that chills your bones, manic and hollow.
Subscribe now if you don't want to end up like us.
Jody shrieked, trying to lighten the mood, but her voice cracked. It didn't work. I thought that was it. We were done for. Then the door creaked open. We didn't wait to question it. We sprinted out of that room, down the corridor, up the stairs, and didn't stop until we were outside, gasping for air. But as we stood there, catching our breath, I looked back at the entrance. The door we had come through was gone. It was like the basement had swallowed it whole. We didn't speak of it for days. When we finally did, Jody swore she could still hear the whispers at night, and Pete had dreams of that room. As for me, I did some digging. Turns out there were rumors about that basement, rumors that patients were locked away down there, left to die in isolation. Some even said that a few of them went mad, clawing at the walls, repeating the same phrases over and over. I got curious and did more research, and I found out that the phrase insane in the membrane, insane in the brain, was not just random graffiti. As I dug deeper into the history of Granger Asylum, I learned that it was connected to a series of twisted experiments conducted during the 1930s on patients labeled as irreparably insane.
This phrase became the calling card of Dr. Samuel Roth, the asylum's lead physician, notorious for his brutal methods. His fascination with mind control and brain manipulation led him to experiment on those he believed were beyond help.
What they did in that basement, well, it still haunts me. Roth believed that by drilling into the skull and altering the brain structure, he could cure madness.
His most infamous experiment involved inserting metal plates directly into the brain's membrane, an attempt to sever connections between the conscious and subconscious mind.
This horrific procedure led to severe infections, massive brain damage, and, unsurprisingly, death.
Patients would scream as the drill pierced their skulls, their bodies convulsing as he worked.
He noted in his journals that some patients, right before their final breath, would mutter the same thing over and over. Insane in the membrane, insane in the brain. And then there was Subject X, the one patient who survived, or at least what was left of them.
Dr. Roth's most prolonged victim, Subject X, was kept isolated in that basement room, forced to endure years of painful procedures, never able to speak, only repeat that cursed phrase.
The metal plates drove them mad, and they became something else, something not entirely human.
They were locked away, forgotten when the asylum shut down.
But here's the real twist. Subject X wasn't just another patient. I found out after some more research that X was Dr. Roth's own child, a child who had been born with severe neurological issues.
Roth believed he could fix them, but instead he turned them into a monster.
The staff discovered the truth, but it was too late. They rebelled, killing Roth in a fit of rage right in the basement.
His body was never found. Rumor has it that Subject X did something to him, something unspeakable.
Now, when Pete, Jody, and I were in that room, I thought the horror was over after we escaped. But I was wrong. We weren't alone in that asylum. As I continued to read through the journal, I realized it wasn't whispers we'd heard. It was a voice. Subject X's voice, or whatever they'd become, was still down there. And that door we found? It was no ordinary door. It led directly into Subject X's domain. About a month after our visit, Pete disappeared.
The police found no trace of him except his camera.
The last footage showed him in the basement of Granger Asylum, standing in front of that same door.
And just before the video cuts out, you hear it. Insane in the membrane, insane in the brain.
I swear I saw Pete, or something that looked like him, standing outside my window a week after he vanished. But it wasn't Pete. It couldn't have been. His eyes were hollow, and his mouth stretched unnaturally wide. I called you in a panic, but by the time you got there, he was gone.
As for Granger Asylum, I'm never going back there. But I still hear that phrase sometimes in the back of my mind late at night when the house is quiet. Insane in the membrane, insane in the brain. And I wonder, was it just a trick of the mind, or did we wake something up that day? Now, I'm not saying ghosts are real, but after that, I'm never going back to Granger Asylum, and if you're thinking about going, don't. That place is cursed, and whatever is still down there behind that door isn't done yet. As I sifted through Dr. Roth's journal one last time, I discovered a photograph that made my heart stop. It showed Pete, his face unmistakable, standing in front of that cursed door. But the photo was dated 1940. My mind raced, trying to process the impossible. Pete wasn't just caught in this nightmare. He had always been part of it. Granger Asylum didn't just trap the souls of its patients, it bent time itself, cycling victims through its horrors, trapping them in endless torment across decades. Pete had always been doomed. As I stared at the photograph, my hands shaking, it became clear that Pete wasn't just another victim of Granger Asylum. He had been there before, long before we ever set foot in that basement. The asylum's twisted nature didn't just trap the souls of its patients, it warped time itself. Pete, or some version of him, had always been caught in its endless cycle. The asylum fed off of the lives and minds it consumed, pulling them back into its timeline. Pete wasn't the first, and he wouldn't be the last. Time wasn't linear in that place. It looped, folding in on itself, pulling the unlucky souls into its clutches over and over again. That photograph, dated 1940, showed Pete standing in front of the same door we found, the same one that led us into the horror beneath the asylum. His expression in the photo was twisted and unnatural, that same grotesque grin we saw just before he died. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. Pete had been a part of this nightmare long before we'd ever set foot in Granger Asylum. He was doomed the moment we walked through those gates, because the asylum had already claimed him in a different time. Jody and I hadn't just lost Pete. He had been claimed by the asylum's endless loop, his soul trapped in a horrifying eternity, repeating the same fate over decades, if not centuries. And the worst part? I started to wonder if I, too, was now a part of the asylum's twisted timeline. Would we ever truly escape, or were we just destined to be dragged back into its clutches, reliving the terror over and over again? In that moment, I realized something chilling. Granger Asylum didn't just claim bodies, it consumed identities, bending reality itself to trap its victims. Is that going to be my fate? I wondered with apprehension. If you made it to the end, congratulations. But remember, Granger Asylum isn't just a story, it's a warning. Hit that like button if you're still sane after hearing this, and subscribe if you dare come back for more. Share this video if you want to freak out your friends. Who knows, maybe someone's already trapped in their own Granger Asylum. Keep your eyes open. You never know when time will loop back on you.